Well, as we're sitting here at LTV on this beautiful morning / early afternoon, um, Wednesday, March 14th here, March 13th here, 2024 here with the Hello Hello Show. And my name is Haim Mizrahi, continuing with the tradition of public access and the tradition of the Hello Hello Show that's been on the air since 1980. Of course, not to fail to mention the contribution by Fraser Dougherty, Francis Ann, and of course the likes of you out there to make it your business to enhance and fortify the concept of public access. One of my friends told me that actually the shooting light of this common light here that happens to be awful at best make me look like I'm floating on thin air as my hair thins, and so I told him, "What's new? Nothing is new." And it just so happens to be that he's bald altogether.
You mean?
So wait, I'm not showing you yet. So thank God. Lenore Bailey and Steve Romm are here with us this afternoon. First of all, a joy to have you here, Lenore.
Why, thank you.
What a
Ron.
relief.
Do you want to go home and have Lenore do the interview?
No, I think that
Actually, I was thinking about interviewing the both of you.
you have a free hand here, baby.
I think you should explain to your vast audience out there. And you actually met somebody last week who actually listens to the show. And I met somebody, so that's at least two people that watch the show. So, the audience is expanding, that you had an injury and your back is bothering you. And it just so happens that yesterday we went for a walk in the woods, and a large
on
obstacle,
a trail. We went
on
to
a,
the
on a
trails.
trail, and a large obstacle called a tree was lying across the path, which I observed carefully and attempted to step over, got caught and fell down. But I've learned, having done this before, that you gently roll into the fall. So nothing was severely injured except my pride. And
Listen, I know all about. I did jujitsu for many years, and many times in the past, I was saved by the bell. But when you fall back first, rolling onto
it's
a
the
flight of
worst.
stairs, so it's all about grazing, and so what happened here, I was hoping. I didn't think that 1 second looked much longer than it was.
Right.
Obviously,
It's
you
in slow
probably,
motion.
yeah. So I was kind of counting on the fact that just about now I'm gonna hit, like something's gonna stop me, but he kept on saying. So I went like, boom. So and I think that my body was telling itself to slant a little bit, because even my body didn't think it was a good idea that I'm going to land on my coccyx.
Right.
So I landed on the upper section of the hip, where it's just like a square of muscle, but obviously it's a concentration of that proximity to nerve ends and nerves, whatever. But I think that what really happened that was good is that my instinctive desire to get out of that shock, but vis-a-vis breathing. So even the owner of the house came and all this, and I just stopped everyone. I went like, and I balanced myself. I just wanted to realize I didn't move, nothing. I just realized by breathing where I stand as far as potential injuries or stuff like
Right.
that.
If you concentrate on the part of your body that hurts you and do 10 deep breathing breaths, it will help that spot. Think about that spot that's hurting and breathe. And that is actually, it's part of a meditation that I used to do many, many years ago.
Yeah, but I want to take the opportunity to because we were having Lenore Bailey here. Lenore and I are really friends for many years. Of course, Steve Rum, you too. But
Thanks.
I think
Lenore,
I introduced you to Stephen.
yeah, like Steve Rum. By the way, you too.
Yeah, thanks.
But Lenore and I, we used to have some meaningful conversations back in the day, and there was no way. And now it's interesting that you two got together and decided to get married, and you happen to be equally evenly intelligent. I think it's incredible as much as it's unbearable almost.
Well, also we're both alphas.
Is that yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah, it goes really well.
But
I've learned to be very subtle in my old age.
the thing is that you introduced something to this community about 25 years ago, at least,
At
correct?
least.
Uh, and I remember that when I first dared to think that I'm an artist, that was in the midst of that fright, incredible uh, mental exhaustion
Uh-huh.
when I first started that journey. And I think that you did something incredible for me when you was responsible for having artists gather, whether it's in a restaurant or whatever. That whole concept of saying, "Come, don't worry about anything. Let me do the job. Let me if I want to interview you, if I want to chat with you, if I want to talk to you, bring your piece,
Right.
speak your piece. You left enough room. You made the person feel comfortable enough about him or herself that they're actually volunteering beneficial information about
Artists
themselves."
love to speak
Yeah, I
about
know.
themselves, Haim.
so,
So once you show up, if you're bringing work, it's very easy to interview
and it
someone
wasn't even
because,
something that was said. It's just your demeanor, your
well, thank
personality.
you.
So that was like something that doesn't go away.
Thank
Just
you.
like I remember about Steve Romm when he first decided to admit that there is something about my work, long before he said it was good. But that was
I
enough
said it was
because
good.
long before. But that was enough. That carries its weight, and then it determines what kind of obstacles you can do without and you can uh, avoid. And I spoke about it many times here, especially the times that you didn't listen. I was making sense in thanking you and thanking the people in my life that were like just said something and then it just expanded into become something very meaningful.
I think that was. I don't know if this
You're
does this
fine.
pick me up.
Yeah, it does. It
Okay.
does.
I think that was interesting. It's almost like divided into two categories. I knew you as an artist, and I knew you as a friend. The art part being very separate. I saw
It
the
came later.
progress
Yeah.
being made, and became part of that. In that it really, I saw the potential that you had, and what you could eventually do, and where you could go, and the changes that you've made over the years. And without speaking about my art, in a lot of ways, you followed the same path. You changed. You changed a lot of things, and you weren't afraid to change things. You're very prolific in the way you paint. I'm not prolific. It just takes me a long, long time to do a painting. But if you go back and you look at some of the things, I just put a piece on the internet that I did in 1970, and I look at it, and I see that there are things in that painting that are still in the paintings that I do today. There's certain basic structural things that carry through over all these years. And the painting from 1970 stands up. It's just as good
Yeah,
today as it was
and also
then.
Lenore, you and him are so different in the art that you created. Talk to me a little bit about where you
Well,
stand
I'm
when
a
it comes to your
photographer,
art.
but as all artists do, the process, of any good artist, your process is in your thoughts, what you want to do, and that grows until you can go out in the world and then see what you want to paint or photograph. In my case, I photographed for many years now. I am a very prolific artist. Stephen is as well. Our basement is filled with his work and my work. And of course, our home where we live is filled also with our work. But I got to the
One
point
of
where,
which happens to be mine. Sorry, I couldn't
right?
resist
and
the
you have
temptation.
and you have one of mine.
I
Yeah,
could
Right.
I couldn't resist the temptation. Sorry, I apologize.
that's okay.
But of course, I then started painting my photographs and I started printing on canvas.
You were one of the
So,
first, yeah? I
well,
assume.
We were doing it way
Well,
before a lot of other
we
people.
did it.
some others do, but not to the level that you
Well, we
did.
did it because you and I had a printer
We well,
long before other people did out
because
here.
the business that I had
Correct.
required printing.
Correct. So, yes. So that process went from just taking a photograph and getting something spectacular into taking a great photograph and then adding to it by hand painting it. Now, there was I don't want to say any names, there was someone that owned a gallery out here, and she said to me, "Oh, I will never show anybody that does digital prints. I just will not show photographs in digital prints." Well, Stephen and I went to the show, went to the gallery, and here is walls and walls of digital prints,
art.
but they're called
Giclée.
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 So because they were called giclées,
They had no idea.
she didn't know that they were really photographs that were scanned on a computer, worked on, manipulated, and voila. So, I think the art world out here was wonderful for a long, 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 long time. When de Kooning was here, and the greats were out here. And then, of course, after 2011,
I think it was
it
more.
just
I think it was
died.
more. I think it was
Yeah.
more the COVID thing than anything else.
Now
but the thing is,
COVID,
though, I don't envy the new generation that has so many options and possibilities. So what happens? It prevents them from being genuine, being hands-on. I still face the canvas and I desire to paint.
I
I'd
desire to
like to
photograph.
have
Yeah.
a brush here, a few brushes there, brush in my
Right.
mouth, whatever. It's like you smell it, you feel it, you have to wash your hands constantly or not. But I like that contact, and right there, I'm guaranteed some kind of an interesting result because it's real paint.
Right. Yes, I think I agree. I mean, once you have that in you, that process is always in your brain. You're always thinking about it. It's just a natural, it's like an extension of your extremities, your brain and your thoughts and your creativity. And I think that's true of all great artists.
And it's interesting because my style, if I can have it, declare that I do have a style, it allows me to be more bold in my reactions.
Loose, creative.
But bold because I can do things that most artists would not even dare doing, like painting over, but not painting over to cover, painting over without knowing what the result will be. Transparency, for example, as opposed to you, Steve, that you can do that, but you will never do it because with your style, you won't invest 100 hours in some kind of a section of the painting and then do something that will spell like maybe it will be gone forever. Maybe it won't be there in 2 minutes from now.
He's
If you
done
were,
that.
yeah, but I mean, for me, it's daily occurrence.
Uh-huh.
I think the thing that was really interesting for me when I first started doing landscapes out here, went to a couple of art shows around when there were more galleries around, and suddenly started seeing landscape paintings that looked exactly like what I was doing, the low horizon line, the clouds, that sort of thing. But there's a significant difference. Same with you. There are people who tried to do landscapes and tried to do paintings that had a similar look to what I was doing, but there's no way that they could do it the way I do it. It takes, actually, and you and I have talked about it. It started because we were up in Great Barrington. We were in an art supply store. Lenore saw these things on the shelf that were metallic powders and said, maybe you should use these in your painting. I think I bought 6 bottles, little bottles, and it's like dust. I mean, it's literally like dust.
it's
And
pigment dust, yeah.
It's finer than that. I mean, it's like it. If you put your paintbrush into it, you go like that, it just goes
Yeah.
in the air. So I started doing it, and now I have hundreds of little containers of metallic powder. But to get the kind of paintings that I have takes hundreds and hundreds of layers. And unless you know how to control it and how to work with it, it doesn't work. It's an unmitigated disaster for anybody trying to do it. So, when I looked at the other paintings that people were trying to copy, the style that I was doing, it doesn't get it. I think the most important thing, and you and I have talked about it over and over again, is how do we get artists back together to communicate with each other out here so that were they great artists in the 50s and 60s and 70s? Sure. Are they great artists today out here? Absolutely. Nobody talks to anybody. Everybody is in their own little cubicle section, mentally and physically. There is no such thing as what Lenore used to do. I remember being interviewed by Lenore at, I think it was Saracens at the time, and you brought a painting or a
I had
photograph
to
or whatever
the
drag
Star
him.
Room. Remember the
I
Star?
had
remember
to
the,
drag
and
him
Lenore
to
was
that.
dressed up in an evening gown.
but wait, there was the Star Room, correct?
I did the Star Room
Yeah,
as
I
well.
loved it. Going up to the second floor,
It was great.
I
loved
also
it.
did.
And we had our own kind of section there.
The first one I did was at a railroad station. That was, I think,
Oh, that's the one in Watermill,
in Watermill.
the restaurant.
Yeah,
in
And it's
got
Watermill.
it.
it's
Yes.
a car,
That's before
a
me.
railroad
That's
car.
behind the post
That's
office,
way
no?
before you.
Way before me. I remember.
But wait, that's
Saracen.
behind the post office, correct?
Right.
That was the first show I
All the
ever
way back.
did.
I
That
love it.
restaurant.
I love it.
And the food was so good. I mean, it was just wonderful because you could eat while we were all discussing art, sitting around a table, and people would bring in a piece that they were working on, and then we would discuss it and eat at the same time. And that was a lot of fun.
I think that when Lenore had the artist dinners, my recollection is there were at least between 20 and 30 artists plus their partners, and so you had and people weren't coming just to drink wine. They were coming with their artwork and to discuss art. It was really great. I mean, by the time you finished with dinner and you finished with dessert, you had met a lot of other people, some of whom you knew, some of whom you met for the first time, but there was an energy in that room that doesn't exist today. And it's a shame. And I think that if you did find a restaurant that said, yeah, we'd be glad to do that, you're not going to get artists turning out to come to it.
Well, what also
But the
happened?
mentality is different.
What also
also.
happened? A lot of other people. Everyone was welcome. Anyone. You didn't
Yes.
have to be an artist. So that's when years later, I had done it for about 5 years, and then gradually real estate brokers were coming, bank tellers were coming,
Yeah.
It
people that
changed.
were
And
not
you,
artists.
and you cannot blame them. Why wouldn't they? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, why
right.
would they?
It
If
was
you
a
were to
big
be
party.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they
yeah,
were
yeah.
there for the drinking, which was free at the time, and they would pay for their dinners, but they were enjoying the party part of it
Yeah.
because it was a party.
Yeah, it was a party, definitely. But also, again, as I mentioned, you brought something to it that elevated it from just being a party period,
It was structured.
yeah, but also just I don't know what word I'm trying to use, that the being an artist yourself, of course, so you can evaluate properly what it really means when you're facing an artist. What is that question or that interaction that's going to take place right now in the next seconds? You could kind of foresee it,
Well, of
and also
course.
give by doing that and by having that ability, allowing the other person to really be himself and to really entertain the people out there once they see that back and forth. And having Ryan with you
Right.
did not hurt at all.
Well, Ryan was fabulous.
Yes,
He was my cameraman and
and
did
friend, and just like he
such a
loved.
great job.
I think the word you're looking for and the feeling that I had as the artist, this was a level of professionalism that people brought to the dinner. And you knew that if you were putting your painting or photograph or whatever the work of art was on that easel, you better know what you're talking about. This was not a hobby. The people that were coming there were professional artists, really good artists overall, and they were under the gun because of Lenore's questions. To be able to answer questions, you had to really know what you're doing.
Well,
And that was
actually,
important.
for photographers, for instance, the first question I would ask is, what kind of camera do you use? And if it was just, oh, I use a
Brownie.
a Sony or something,
Yeah.
I would just sort of hesitate a little bit because I was used to people that were using professional cameras, Bronicas and Hasselblads, Mamaias, right? Nikon Fs in those days. This is the days of film, not digital. And, so that was important.
And I remember that I had a book that I published or something, and I brought it, and you looked at the book, and you asked me questions as if it's the most incredible thing you've ever seen, and you managed to ask questions and said, how many questions can she ask about this thing?
It was a book of poetry.
Yeah, it was a book of poetry,
but you and I both write.
Yeah, correct. But you made it sound really, you really were digging in as it should be this way. That's why when I had people here along the years, and I saw that people were restless because they were anticipating that I'm going to ask trivial questions until they realized that I ask questions that they cannot answer because they cannot even relate to it. They cannot understand the question.
Yeah.
So I always brought them in line with behaving themselves, because I wanted to show them that they cannot get away with being shallow or disregarding the moment,
Right.
And if they did not behave themselves, after all, I would ask another question that would really bring that light of ridicule. They were like under the light of being ridiculed if they weren't to get with the program. So I had this ability to disproportionately ask questions that will bring into the equation a steady back and forth interaction, which is the main thing that I was wishing for.
Well, that's what you have to do. And you have to constantly, try and eke out from them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Some people are very difficult to interview. Some people don't want to talk. Some people are shy. Some people, just don't know what to say. They get camera frozen. But I always seem to be able to put people at ease. And of course, at the dinners, they would have a few glasses of wine, and that would loosen people up too.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was years ago.
The painting that I'm doing and the affair that I'm having, that will loosen up a little bit.
Yes, loosen up a little bit, yeah.
But I think that what bothers me, and you brought it up, first question at that time was, what kind of camera you use? My first question today is, how do you go about creating your painting? Because when I go on the phone and I look up to see what people are doing,
well, I meant if it was a photographer.
I understand, but so many people are taking stuff right off of computer-generated images and calling it their own. I mean, you can look up wallpaper that you put on your phone, and some of it is absolutely magnificent. It's beautiful. You can't even paint to that level with that kind of technology. But to take that, print it out on canvas as a 40 by 60 or whatever it is, and then put a little paint on it and say you did the painting is not exactly legitimate. I do think that people who are using that kind of technology and using it in a creative way, and I've seen a lot of it, some of it is absolutely beautiful. And they're not saying that they started from scratch with a painting. They're using AI and computer generated images as a basis to do their own work. And it's spectacular. It's another level.
Yes.
There had to be a time where people who, during the Renaissance, would say, if you're not doing the process of stretching your own canvas, using linen, all the things that went into traditional painting, and then somebody came along and started doing something that was more abstract, or they went from 1-point perspective to 2-point perspective, there would be a revolution going on. People would say, well, this is the new generation. They don't know what they're doing. Well, they did know what they were doing. Or claiming that Picasso started Cubism. There was a whole revolution against that kind of thing. But it got settled in, it got recognized, and it continues today.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to use computers.
And the point that I'm trying to make is that we miss out on the opportunity to be able to maybe indirectly ridicule the masters after we admire them. We can just kind of say, okay, you know what?
Haim, we went to a show in the city.
Wait. Let me finish the point of so much of what we have available as a giving now, they didn't have. I mean, Jackson Pollock always talked about the fact that he could not afford that red that he wanted, or this color or that color, and it was just pathetic even to go to the paint store to prepare, and that gallon had to last forever because it was $100, and and they couldn't mix colors as they wish. They couldn't just like have at their disposal like 100 gallons right there or whatever it is. They could not at moments notice have things available that will help them pursue ideas and breakthroughs and styles. They were pretty anchored into, and when I say anchored, I mean limited. Anchored is good, but it's short lived. So you will never hear today someone, when I did the the F Pollock series, I remember I did it instinctively because I was tired, because I wanted to do drip. I knew I was pretty good at it, and I knew that there is a bad drip and a good drip. And I realized that not anyone can just create a good drip. And that was a revelation. And I wanted my chance to last longer. So I had to brush him off. And Janet Lair understood that. When Janet took upon herself to do that and to show, she said, anyone that will approach me and have a problem, I say, I don't know, talk to the artist. But that much I can tell you. He is not saying what you think he's saying. He's more saying like, let me live and let live. Let me do my thing. And that person didn't even live long enough to give us his full potential, obviously with the drip. If he was to live another 10 years, we would probably be experiencing a lot of psychedelic stuff that he could have done that he didn't get the chance. And just one thing to add, with Vito Sisti,
yes,
was the person that told me, bring that piece of F. Pollock. I had a really wonderful piece. And I decided if I'm going to do F. Pollock on the painting, I'm going to choose the best drip I have.
right.
I'm not going to conceal something bad or mediocre underneath because I can afford to do that. I took the best drip. So he said, I have no problems. I'll do it. So guess what happened? Some women came in, elderly women, and they demanded for this painting to come down at Ashwa Hall.
Well, because it was a woman's show.
No, it wasn't a women's show.
Oh, well,
No, it was
Vito
that.
usually
It was
did
that
the
group show that he
women's.
used to have. He
Yeah,
used
I
to have a
remember
women's
it
show,
was a group show.
and he used to have a group show.
Oh.
But in that group show, it was hanging everything, the whole 9 yards.
And they demanded it be taken down. Why?
So Vito called me and he said, "Listen, I did my best. I
Yeah.
think it's best if you come take it down." So guess what happened? I went there, and my painting was on the floor.
Ah.
So, and these angry women, I turned to this woman and I said, "If you were a man, I would crush your face right now here. How dare you touch my painting?
Right.
And don't give me this crap about being angry.
Right.
What does who told you that you're entitled?
Right. There's
You know,
no
do
rules
not
to art.
touch my painting.
Yeah.
It's a good painting. You're just oblivious of knowing whether it is or not.
Right.
Stay away. Keep distance. And by the way, I'm going to bring another painting that happens to be great without all this. And let's see what you're going to have to say about that.
And interesting
I
enough,
never heard that story.
Interesting enough, if you watch TV nowadays, and I was pointing it out to Lenore recently, that word has become so commonplace on television and in television shows, it's now almost part of everyday language. It's used in almost every single show. It's barely bleeped anymore or censored anymore. And it's become part of our daily vocabulary. And there were words that you couldn't say on television. Who was it? Who's the famous comedian?
Carlin.
George Carlin said the 7 words you can never say. I think it was 7 words. Well, out of those 7 words, 6 of them are now used all the time on TV. Nobody never even censored
George
anymore.
Said all 7 of them.
And George said all 7 of them, and people would go berserk. Hearing the word that you're talking about on television or on TV shows is now commonplace. It's not a big deal anymore. It's used by politicians.
But I'm not even focusing on that word. I just said because it just happens to be my way of saying, leave me alone, let me be.
Times have changed where if you put that same painting up today, I bet you that nobody would even blink at that painting being
to
up
make
the
my
wall with
point.
that thing.
When Jackson Pollock showed his stuff at the art shows that they had at the Guildhall in the late 40s, early 50s, It was the women's society or whatever it is, that the elderly women, they were like belittling him, looking down at him, and asking, "Who's this guy anyway?" Since day one, people had zero tolerance for Jackson Pollock's work. Nobody could understand what's going on. Not because they couldn't, it's because they didn't allow themselves to get to the point to be able to understand. And that requires time, patience, and that requires examination. You need to examine it. You need you need to spend time with it. You need to go away and come back. Go away and come back. You need to invest the time. So I'm not surprised that they couldn't handle that. They didn't see the F Pollock. They just saw a drip, and in their mind say, "What a failure! Who is he?" And he thinks that it's good. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, of course I
And
do.
then they drowned in their own saliva.
Right.
We saw a show on TV. Let me just say one thing, and then I'll give it to you. We were watching a program the other night about famous sculptors, Michelangelo. They used to do small sculptures about 18 inches high in clay, and then their craftsmen, their assistants, would come in, and there was a way of doing it where you could take an 18-inch sculpture and turn it into a 12, 16, 18-foot marble statue. But he didn't do 99% of the work until the very end. His people knew how to do all the carving. They were showing, it was on the Antique Roadshow, that somebody had a beautiful marble piece
Right.
that was beautifully
Really?
carved. And the reason it wasn't worth a lot of money is because the artist never touched it until the very end, almost just signed it.
Now, in the spirit of that, I want to ask you. So, when you thought, obviously, I'm sure you had 10 different things happening in your head simultaneously when you were actually in the midst, in the thick of it. So I always thought of your work, the potential modernistic aspect, that how much of it was really fermenting in your head when it comes to achieving a breakthrough in your territory vis-a-vis modernism, introducing modernism into that?
Lots, because
That was a
I
good question.
was trying to
Okay, sorry.
I was trying to show a political statement. I was making a political statement with a whole series that I did, one of which is outside in your show today. And what I did was I photographed. So I have a photograph print. Then I would do a special process on that sort of bubbled the photographic print, and then I painted over that. Then I rescanned it and made a print of my original print. So, and hand painted it in between.
So that's the fourth generation already.
There's like 5 different processes that I did to achieve what I was trying to show people. They were like bubbles in the air.
Yeah.
And so I would do a seascape, and there would be bubbles in the air, but I thought they were pretty, I thought, and of course the seascape is always beautiful. If you take a photograph of a landscape or a seascape, it's usually pretty. And I remember telling someone who was about to buy the painting, the photographic hand-painted photograph, and I told them what it was about. It's about the air we were breathing. And they said, we really love it, but now that you told me what it's about, we're not going to buy it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
that's strange.
Whatever, because they didn't like the process that I was trying to make a statement that we have to save this planet, and we have to do it with water. We have to do it with the air, and we have to think and start talking about our soil. I went back to the university it was in the year 1999, I think, and it was Southampton University, and I got my BFA. And I had an I had a sociology teacher that was at that time, and that was like so long ago. And he was talking about topsoil and the fact that we only have about 4 feet of topsoil left on this planet. And once the topsoil is gone, we're not going to be able to grow food. And nobody in this country talks about that. But you know who is? India. India has a big thing going on about saving soil.
Yes,
So,
but India, at the same time, ruining the atmosphere and ruining,
well, they're
in ways.
trying to change that.
So,
They are definitely changing.
I think we got to a point where it's too late to even. It's minimizing the damage. The damage
It's
is
beyond.
Oh yeah, it's beyond all this. But I wanted to go to size, for example.
Yeah.
I'm sure you would have loved to see your work like 6x6, easy.
I have worked.
Yeah,
6
but
by
what I
6.
mean, but I mean, as just as in a casual fashion, so you wouldn't have to think, oh, should I, could I, too difficult, not too difficult. So what is it like? When I think of myself, I think like I create something, and I immediately want to see it already enlarged, like as much as I can. It's instinctively. If this did not happen in your art, in that evolutionary process, was it only because of the technical nature of that task?
Well, it was the technical nature of our printer at that time. But then I was published by an Australian publisher, and he blew up I did a series on a woman's lips, and he blew them up. So
40 by 60.
Right, they're 40 by 60.
That's a nice size.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah.
Big enough.
That's like the one behind you.
Right.
It's something interesting because I started out doing paintings when I was in college. I was selling paintings to a gallery out in Newton, and they were all small little floral paintings, 5 by 7. And I look back at those paintings, and I still have some inches, 5 by 7 inches in a small frame, 8 by 10 frame. And I look back at them, and they're really nice paintings. It took me about 10 minutes to do a painting, and I would sell them wholesale for $65, but they'd buy 10 a week, so it wasn't so bad. And it took me nothing to do the paintings. Today, when I paint, and the same way something in my mind said, paint big. And it wasn't something that I consciously thought of, but it's when I had the space, when I had a studio that had a 30-foot wall, I did a 16-foot painting. I never thought of it as a large painting. It just was natural to do. The more space you had, the bigger you painted. All my paintings, small painting to me is a 24-36. Today, I have a printer that I can take any image, give it to my printer, and do a 4-foot by 8-foot print. Whether I want it on canvas, or I want it on glass, or I want it on plexiglass or wood. I mean, technology has changed. My biggest complaint today is that when you go, following up with what I said before, the artists that are doing it, there's nothing wrong with doing stuff that comes out of a computer, as long as you take that and then make it your own.
Yeah.
Just to take
Of
it
course.
and say, here's a beautiful print that I mean, I have wallpaper in my
and
phone.
you know
that's
that it
gorgeous.
really is easier than people think
Yeah.
it is. I mean, it's very demanding, but it's easier than people think.
There was a time going way back to when I first started teaching, and I have paintings at home that I did in the late 60s. And I used to put them up in the faculty room. And the letters I got from other teachers summarized basically, if you don't love America, get out. That was their reaction
okay.
to my
I remember
paintings.
that.
Okay.
And I got a lot of them. These were not real. In today's world, nobody would even blink.
So
Yeah,
he
but,
too did political
Yeah, I
statements.
know,
I
but
did political stuff.
and so
Right.
luckily the evolutionary process is taking us where it needs to take us. And the thing is, that's why when I was too exposed instantly as I introduced myself to the world of art, especially when I came from nothing that resembles an evolutionary process, per se painting, maybe playing drums, maybe writing poems, but it's nothing close to feeling that connection and saying, I can do it with or without education. But people don't realize that really, if you have all the education in the world and you don't have that evolutionary process that will introduce you eventually to stand in front of a canvas, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And if it will happen, it will be lacking so many things. They will be short-lived and you will be disappointed and abandon it.
Right.
So the thing for me was, how am I going to sneak in my forte, that which is strong, that which I know that I can show with confidence? They might have nothing to do with the painting itself or the process itself, but I can show you that you will be too busy examining the operation than to have time to even get to the point that you will relate to the art. And that's a victory, because if and when you will have the time to come back and re-examine it for the sake of relating to the art, you will do it with a lot of caution.
Yeah, artists.
Because you in the back of your mind will say, I don't want to mess with this guy.
Artists will do that, but not common people that are strolling through an art show or an art gallery that are potential buyers of art because they don't know enough.
Well, I don't know if you remember the Kooning show at Guildhall that he had about 10 years, 15 years ago, and he had like 8 paintings that were, the frame was this thick, and it was like, I don't know, something like 5x7.
Yeah.
And they were all pastelish, pretty boring, but all pastelish. And there was the 2 women standing in front of one of the painting, and she kept on saying, why is it so great? I want to understand why it's so great. And I couldn't resist myself. I think I couldn't resist myself, and turned, and I hear myself tell her, do you want me to tell you what's so great about it? She said yes, and I said, it's because this guy decided to create these 8 paintings, decided to put together these frames that are monstrous, decided to be cliche, adamant, predictable, and executed through these decisions upon which you and I stand and have something to relate to not understanding, to yes understanding, to liking, to disliking. Otherwise, there would be nothing. This is what's so formidable about it, that you were consistent in the execution process, in the production process. That's why when I took that big show early on in 2001 to Jerusalem, I I created according to the space that was available to me.
You put that on LTV, didn't you?
What's that?
That show in Jerusalem.
Yes, I did that.
I remember the dancing and the music. That was so awesome.
Yeah, you got a good memory.
Oh my God, it was great.
So that one actually,
that was great.
This killer critic was there. It wasn't supposed to be there. And people say, oh my God, you're doomed. He's going to crucify you.
Yeah.
He's going to skin you alive, even if you're good. And he came to me, and I mean, I tried to avoid him because I said, I don't, why should I?
Right.
I don't want to. I pretend like I don't know him. I'm always where he's not. And
That's
then,
not like you, Haim.
No, but I mean, I was scared. I was a little scared. And I said, I'm enjoying it. Let me enjoy it until the bad news will reveal its face. So then he came to me. We somehow bumped into each other, and he goes like, he said nothing. And he keeps on saying,
right.
Like, what's this? And then I swear, after like a minute or two of silence and gestures, he said, what's going on here? This is the killer critic. Right. So what happened is, based on that, I continued in the future of my work to relate to what made him dumbfounded. So I elaborated on it.
Yeah.
It was working.
Right.
Because he just didn't know what's going on.
Right.
I know you from the history of Jerusalem, he said, from the jam sessions in that theater in in late 70s and all this. I know the group you were belonging to, but I cannot bring this and you together. So where is it coming from? What's going on? And he wrote a thing in the paper about me that people were, the phone was off the hook, calling me and said, "What happened? What's going on? This guy, what he
Great.
wrote and all this."
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Good.
but then a few years later, I paid dearly for it
Very,
because he came
very,
to another show.
very interesting. Lenore and I were having a discussion a couple of nights ago about how you pronounce the name Vincent van Gogh, which is what everybody says if they see a painting by Vincent van Gogh. And I said, I don't think that's the proper pronunciation. I think it's Vincent van Gogh. So I looked it up verbally. We were both wrong. Everybody is
Gogh.
wrong. No, it's Vincent van Gogh. That's how it's pronounced properly in Dutch, because the letters that are there are pronounced differently.
Yes.
So we're all wrong in how we've been pronouncing the name.
Well, we were taught wrong.
We were taught incorrectly. Lenore and I went to the Museum, I think, of Modern Art, and who was the famous Spanish artist? El Greco. So we're walking through the show, and I said to Lenore, I said, "Do you think this is great work?" And she said, "Yes, this is great work." I said, "Now step back and let me show you something. The anatomy, the actual anatomy," and this is what I have with certain, I learned anatomy. I had to know how to draw every bone in the body from memory and know it by heart. And I'm pointing out to Lenore, looking at this huge painting of figures, where the anatomy is totally wrong, completely wrong. Not only is the anatomy wrong,
But how
the
do you know it
lighting
wasn't
is wrong.
intentional?
It doesn't make any difference. There are certain
Of course
things.
it does.
If you go, but the lighting was wrong, the anatomy was wrong. If you're going to be it, this is strictly my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'll accept that. And I can't go back and interview the person.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something, and if you look at all the work that I've done from day one up to the present, lighting to me is critical. Perspective to me is critical. There's certain rules you can't break or shouldn't break. And if you look at all the great artists that go all the way back, those rules have always been in place. Lighting is critical.
Yeah.
You were talking about this.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned, you're right. I see that my head is like in trouble here. At the top
Should
of my
we
head.
have softer lighting in here?
Why did you have to mention it? Now I'm so self-conscious.
You need a cap
then now I
on.
cannot do
told you.
my freestyle because I focus on myself.
It's very simple. We can change the lighting in here in 2 minutes.
I don't know if it's a good idea.
You just wear a
Well,
cap.
you know what?
I do sometimes. Yeah.
Hence,
It's
I
very
have
simple.
a cap
Yeah,
on.
Turn this off. We'll put candles on
Yeah.
the table, and we'll have
True.
chiaroscuro lighting,
I agree.
and it'll be beautiful.
I agree. But then what about the twistiness? Let's say if a master like Picasso wants to twist things like he did, he twisted it.
But
so
it was still
but
right.
but yeah,
No, wait,
but
there are
no,
plenty of that.
he couldn't be right. He would have to be enough wrong to succeed in what he wanted to achieve.
Except for one thing.
And what was right about what he did was just a suggestion by way of gesturing because he couldn't help himself.
But
No matter how much he wants to, no matter how much he wants to squeeze something, at some point his body gesture will not allow him to go all the way. That's why we will see somewhat of a point of reference to realism, no matter what.
It allowed him to do what he did, because if you go back to his earlier work, he could draw beautifully. He knew his anatomy. He knew how to draw figures. He knew how to draw portraits. Taking that, and that's the basis of going from there into abstract, into different types of works. If you have a foundation that you start changing and changing and changing, it's legitimate. If you just pick up a brush one day and say, okay, I'm going to do cubism, it doesn't work. what works with Picasso, what worked with Dali, what worked with with Rothko and other people is that if you go back to the beginning of their careers, and it's the wrong term, but they were genuine artists in that they had a foundation and knowledge of what the real thing was. And they could take that and distort it, change it, manipulate it, make it their own. And with Picasso putting an eye up here and an eye down there, he knew he could do that because he really knew how to draw the face. So
Yeah.
changing it into that was legitimate.
And in this period, I want to mention that we're sitting here on the 13th of March, year 2024, here with the Hello Hello Show. Lenore Bailey and Steve Romm are here with us. But Lenore, back to you. What is it that you were like holding tight and trying to keep it as close to your chest as possible when it comes to art?
What am I holding tight?
And close and keeping it like really within your eyesight, vision,
I can't
sense,
tell you
smell.
that because it isn't in my head right now. I mean, there are things if I was out in the world that I would see, and then I would go
What
through
was
my
really important
process.
for you, other than the process itself, technically speaking, that took you from point A to point B?
I don't think there was anyone that was important to me. I was given a swinger camera.
As far as your work is concerned, I mean.
Well, I'll tell you how I started. When I was 9 years old, I was given a swinger camera by my mother. And I just fell in love with photography. So since I had been a very little girl, I was photographing. And then when I was a young woman, a very young woman, I had a baby and, of course, photographed the baby and myself constantly. And then I had another child. And so it just, photographing my children, which became a plethora of children and photographs. Hence, I have thousands of photographs in my basement.
In days where everything was a print.
Everything is a print, yes.
And money.
Yes, that too. But I would take slides to Corvettes. Remember Corvettes? EJ Corvettes, right. At that time, if you didn't do prints, you did slides. It was really cheap. It was
sending slides to Elaine Benson.
It was about $1.97 for 36 slides from if you got it processed at EJ Corvettes. But you have to remember, I didn't live out here either. I lived in Rockland County and summered out here. So I did get to meet all the locals when I relocated and raised my children out here. But I was one of those summer residents that was always going back and forth. So I had a lot. I lived in the beginning of the Catskills. So I have mountain pieces and, I have trees and things that don't grow out here.
So the first instance of you applying paint on the surface of a photograph.
Oh boy, I think
How significant was it?
It was significant because I wanted to not just be a photographer that would snap and shoot.
But you did enough of that in order to be able to jump into the next level.
Well, yes, when I was photographing my kids. Of course. But when I worked at Millennium Gallery and I became the
Millennium
director.
Gallery, how ancient.
Okay, so I was the director of Millennium Gallery and I interviewed artists all the time and I interviewed photographers.
What was his name, the owner?
There were two owners. There was Dan Wills and, golly, I forget the name of the other guy.
Oh, my God.
But Dan was great. Dan was my teacher. Dan taught me 20 years of art in 3 years.
Amazing.
He shared everything with me about how to sell art, what to do. I remember.
They cared, didn't they?
Listen to what he did to me. I had some prints on the work table. He said, "Okay, I want you to take this. Or you think they're good?" I said, "Yeah, I really like that one. I want to frame it." He said, "Tear it up." I said, "What?" He said, "I want you to tear up all your photographs." And I looked at him. I said, "I don't know if I can do that." He said, do it and then come back to me. So he made me leave work with my photographs, and I had to make a decision. Either I tore them up or I was going to lose my job. So I actually tore up my photographs, and I realized he was trying to teach me. I felt so free. It was such a bizarre feeling to tear up my work.
Because it was as a burden almost. Is that what he felt?
He was trying to teach me, okay, now you take these torn pieces and now I want you to create a collage.
Okay.
So then I started doing collage. But collage doesn't really
But
sell.
how do you deal with the trauma of tearing it apart?
It was traumatic.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Believe you me. How
Easier
did I
said than
deal with
done.
it? I had to do it because, first of all, I loved him. He was my
And
mentor.
you believed in what he had to say.
He was my mentor.
Yeah.
And yes, so I did it.
Just like Ernst was in the early days for me.
Okay. We all have a mentor.
Yes, and now
There's something that I just wanted to say about the two of you is that if the art business had continued the business that I was in, which was reproductions, posters, etc., and I sold my business in 2004.
You have unlimited sources of images
but the
until the end of
that
time.
I was going to publish, the two artists that I was really interested in publishing are both of you. And I saw about 500 works a week. I would get work was submitted constantly. We had about 600 artists under contract, a lot of local artists, as well as international artists. Lenore's work I wanted to publish, and your work I wanted to publish. But the time was changing when the Chinese came into the market.
Still, you can still do it. It's nothing stands in the way.
There's no place anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, I used to sell to all the major chains, and they're either going out of business, or they simply don't carry art, or they get it from China. And I can't compete. Nobody can compete. All the people.
But if you do it not in order to compete, and still a quality scenario that we can be unfolded.
It would be interesting to take Lenore's small. What's changed in the industry is that I can take a 5x7 print from Lenore, and I can make it literally 4 feet by 8 feet, just as sharp as the small one.
Yes.
There are photographers out here who are shooting 35 millimeter or digital. I don't use a camera anymore. I use my phone. The phone is incredible how the technology has changed.
Yeah.
I can take that image out of my phone, take it to my printer, and say, I want this 4 feet by 6 feet, and I need it printed on aluminum.
Good.
When you see that, it's not impressive anymore.
We got on about 2.5 minutes. I just wanted to say that I was talking a lot about the thing with artists, like how you can encourage bravery, a moment of bravery, which is actually spells recklessness of it, because you're brave enough to get to the point where you lose awareness of the moment and becomes reckless, but you come from complete awareness. And I remember that I spoke to one of them was Michael Kenigan. I was talking to him a lot about it, and he kept on saying, "What is this thing that you're saying all the time? I cannot relate to it." And one day he visited me in my studio, which was very unusual, and I said, "Okay, golden opportunity. Sit down. Let me show you what I meant." And I took and I did something, and he turned and he said, "You're a better man than I am." I remember that work, that impact. And sometimes you look at another person, like many times with Steve, things that I created, and he comes to visit me, and he doesn't even have to say a word. I see his body language, and I know I'm doing okay. And that in itself, it's a big deal. It's a lot of information. It's as if he sat and spoke to me and commented for half an hour nonstop. And all I needed is to see how his body moves or face expression. But let me just conclude, because whether you believe it or not, we've been on the air for an hour.
Right.
It was a pleasure to sit with you.
Well, thank you both.
With both of you guys, really, and highly encouraged, and for you to come and show up more often than not. And I'm glad that you called today and offered to join us, and that made it as good as it was.
Well, thank you.
And you too, Steve Romm. I really appreciate it. And we're going to be here tomorrow as much as we were here yesterday, and as much as we're here this afternoon maybe morning/early afternoon. March 13th, year 2024, here with the Hello Hello Show. And my name is Haim Mizrahi again. Thank you to my guests, Lenore Bailey and Steve Romm. God bless. Keep on doing what you're doing. And we're going to be here every day.